Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to another episode of the Awakened Souls podcast. I'm your host, Devin Brown, a Kundalini activator, spiritual guide, mentor, and overall just a very good source, hopefully, of entertainment. Today, we are going to be talking about what if we fail? We're in a new year. A lot of people set resolutions. A lot of people set ideas that they want to achieve, goals that they want to see brought to fruition. But then there is that little voice in the back of our heads that say, what if I fail? What if I make a move and things get worse? What if I don't like the end outcome? What if I can't control the outcome? And one of the things that I'm going to be speaking to is from a healed version of a codependent. I want you guys to recognize, like, if you haven't listened to my podcast in the past, I was very codependent. I found I did not ever feel safe unless I could be in control. And one of the ways I did that was I pushed myself into trying to overanalyze and have outcome A, B, or C put together, or, like always had contingency plans and always tried to control the way other people acted in order to make myself feel safe. And I just was not living in flow, not living in a place of peace, not living in a place of calmness, not living in a place of thorough understanding. I literally just was. And I was spastic. I was like never enough. I was constantly chasing, constantly pursuing, constantly avoiding, constantly feeling victimized, and so much more. But one thing that I could say is I did have lots of adventures. Like, I was a business owner. I did a lot of things. But one thing that I did is I always took into account, okay, do I think this is going to work out? And I really would weigh the pros and cons before I would move forward in those things. But when it comes to other parts of my life, it was a complete disaster. It was just all over the place. Like, I look at myself and I look at the past, and I knew that I was one of the most productive, disassociated, afraid of outcomes person, that I just had to know how things were going to work out. I couldn't rest until I felt that I had some control in the outcome. And let me just state, what a miserable way to live. But so many people, that's exactly what we're doing. You're not letting yourself be healed. You're not letting yourself let go of fear. You're not letting yourself just be. So what does it mean to let go of being afraid to fail? What does it mean to let go of the idea that things have to work out? And I'm talking in your job. I'm talking in your relationship. I'm talking in your personal goals. I'm talking in your financial goals. I'm talking in career goals. I'm talking everything. What happens if this idea of failure comes? First, what is failure? Failure is when we don't meet a criteria or a goal that has been put forth. Failure is when we feel like we have let other people down. Failure is when we feel like we have let ourselves down. Failure is when we are holding ourselves to the standard that we absolutely feel we have no choice but to meet. And sometimes those standards come from what other people have told us. Sometimes those standards come from within ourselves. Sometimes those standards have just existed through time and space because we are human and we like to pass those things on from one generation to the next. But what if we fail? What if we give ourselves permission to fail? What if you were told, if it doesn't work out, it's fine? Think about this. You've never played basketball before in your life, which I know many of you this is not going to compute with, but just pretend. You get on the court, somebody hands you a ball and says, okay, I want you to make that goal. If you make it through the net, you're great. If you don't make it, it's okay. It's fine. There's no pressure that you have to get into that net. There's no pressure that it has to be fully put in there. But what happens in the real world, what happens when you live your lives is you have this idea that you're not allowed to fail. You have this idea that things have to succeed and have to work out. You have this idea that you must complete X, Y, or Z. One of the hardest things I did was going for divorce after being married for 13 years and coming from a religion where you're not supposed to get divorced. You're supposed to make it work. You're supposed to fight tooth and nail and like go forgive 70 times 7 and all of this other stuff, like in order to say, nope, I cannot. Failure is not an option. But what if it is? Because the truth is, it is an option. We are allowed to not hit our goals. We are allowed to change our minds. We are allowed to need more time and space to figure things out. We are allowed to not know what that next step is. We are allowed to need guidance from other people. We are allowed to fail. We need to take this negative connotation that we have given the idea of failure away and look at it for what it really is. The idea and the fear of failure, in essence, is a way to control. It's a way to control others. It's a way for people to control you. It's a way for you not to step out into something that's uncomfortable. It's a way that can sometimes keep us from growth. Some of us are so comfortable in our own chaos that we are afraid to grow because we're afraid that it might cause failure in other areas of our lives. When I went to therapy, one of the first things that the therapist asked me was what I was afraid of the most with this. And I told her how this was going to change my relationship with my friends and family and the people in my circle, because I felt like I was going to fail them. I felt like I was going to disappoint everybody else, but I knew I needed to do this for me. And we need to take this idea that failure and disappointment is detrimental. We need to take this idea that if we don't succeed right away, then we're not good enough and throw it out the window. We need to take this idea that failure is a bad thing and turn it and transmute it into the idea that it is a growth thing, because that is exactly what it is. Failure is not detrimental. Failure is fertilizer for your growth. Failure is fertilizer for showing you how you can do better. Failure is showing you what it takes. Like, think about all the scientific discoveries that we have, all these scientific theories that we have in place now. They were not in place for lack of experimentation and lack of trying different things, aka failure. But we looked at that and we saw growth. We looked at that and we learned new things. So every time you fail, and I'm using finger quotes here, every time you fail in your mind, I want you to stop and say, what did I learn from this situation? And then realize that wasn't a fail. It was simply a teachable moment. That wasn't a failure. It was simply a flashlight shining on where I need to grow. That wasn't a failure. It was simply X, Y, or Z. But here's the thing. You cannot force someone else to not fail you. You cannot force someone else's behavior to act a certain way. You can only control yourself. You can only control what you do. You can only control how people perceive, like, are speaking to you, not even the way they perceive you. I want to go back, like, because I started saying perceive. Like, you can only control what you do, what you speak. If someone is talking negatively to you, if someone is berating you, if someone is abusing you verbally, you get to decide if that person is going to talk to you like that or not. You get to walk out of the room. You get to cut that person out of your life. You get to say no more. Absolutely not. You get to set boundaries. You get to control that, but you don't get to control other people. And that was one thing I had to learn as I grew away from codependence and as I healed myself, and I learned to let go of this idea that failure was the worst thing I could possibly achieve, that disappointing people was the worst thing I could possibly achieve because that was a part of failing other people. I had to let go of this idea that everybody else's needs came above mine, and that if I didn't have everything worked out exactly perfect, then it wasn't going to be how I wanted it to be. Like, one idea that comes to mind is there's so many people that believe that they have to meet these set goals and do these set things within a set amount of time, especially in Western culture. You graduate high school, then you go to college, then you start a career, then you start dating someone. And if you've been dating for a set amount of time, you have to get married. You have to move that relationship forward. It's just the next logical step. And there's a lot of people who don't believe that. I get it. But we do have this platform and this blueprint built into our society where we are programmed to be afraid of failure. We are programmed to be afraid of analyzing where we're at and which way we want to go to move forward. We are programmed to believe that by failing, we disappoint other people and therefore we're not good enough. And that's not the case. We need to look at this more as what it truly is. It's a way of growth. It's a way of moving forward. It's a way of healing. So what if we fail? So what? So what if you fail? We are not going to be perfect, but we can learn from our imperfections. We are not going to be able to control our outcomes for everything, but we can learn to flow into everything. We can learn to let go. We can learn to just be. We can learn to have faith. We can learn to not be afraid of failure, to not be afraid of not being the one chosen, to not be afraid of stepping away from something that's toxic from us, from not being afraid of starting that new career path or that new job or that new whatever it is that you feel like you've been wanting to do. Failure is the first step towards success, because if you only succeed and you only keep succeeding and you only keep succeeding, you really have learned nothing. You haven't learned how to adapt. You haven't learned how to handle disappointment. You haven't learned how to grow. You haven't learned how to be empathic towards other people. You haven't learned what it is you truly need or what it is you truly desire. You haven't learned how to be true to yourself. You haven't learned what it is that you need to focus on for yourself. We need to accept this idea that failure is okay. We need to accept the idea that failure can be a blessing. We need to accept this idea that failure doesn't have to be scary. It can be exciting instead. That doesn't mean that failure isn't going to be scary, especially if sometimes when we fail, repercussions come on not only ourselves, but we do disappoint other people and we have to face that. But come at it with a transmuted attitude. Come at it with a transmuted point of view. Come at it with a transmuted life lesson. I have a friend who is in the process of finalizing her divorce, and she told me, I actually, for the first time in my life, took out a notebook and wrote down what I will never settle for again and what I want. I am 56 years old and I have never done this before. And I'm finally sitting down and I'm saying enough is enough. This is what I want to do. This is what I want in my future. And I'm not settling for anything less. It took failures to get to that point of growth. It took failures in other people's eyes to get to that point. But they weren't failures. They were growing opportunities. They were learning opportunities. They were opportunities where the universe was like, okay, I think you're ready. Here, let's see how you change. Let's see how you approach this different. Let's see what you do differently. And we have that saying, try the same thing over and over again. And it's the definition of insanity if it keeps failing over and over again. And that's pretty much accurate. If we keep doing the same thing over and over again, and we find ourselves floundering, or we find ourselves not growing in the way that we want to grow, but we're not willing to quit because that's a failure, you're already failing. You're not growing the way you want to grow. You're not moving the way you want to move. You're not holding yourself into the light that you want to be held in. So in essence, you already are failing. Don't be afraid of letting go. Don't be afraid of changing. Don't be afraid of disappointing others. Don't be afraid of trying new things. Don't be afraid of pursuing that dream that your guides keep telling you to go for, because when we are not afraid and we decide to just flow, But while we flow, we keep ourselves in the highest vibration that we want to be. We keep ourselves lifted up. We keep ourselves moved forward. We keep ourselves in this beautiful, organic, flowing nature state where what comes towards us, we can handle when it comes. What we cannot control at the moment, we let go and we'll pick it back up when the time comes. Easier said than done. I understand that. But when we let go of the idea that we have to be afraid of failure, there is so much freedom that comes with that. I have had so many things that I have tried to start. This is part of the ADHD thing that I've decided this is not for me. I don't look at that as a failure. I look at that as, yeah, I learned that that is not my gifting. I learned that that is not what I should be focusing on. That is not a failure. It is simply me saying that is not for me. And I want you guys to give yourselves permission to not be afraid of failure. I want you to give yourselves permission to not be afraid of messing up. But if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and you feel like you're floundering, you feel like you're failing, finger quotes there again, and you can't seem to get up, it's time to take responsibility and say, you know what? All right. Definition of insanity. It's working out right here in my mind. It's working out right here in my life. It's working out right here in this place. It's time for me to make different choices and get off my butt and move forward. And again, easier said than done, but that's part of it. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't beat yourself up over failure. Learn from it. See what it is that you can shift and you can transmute it into. If you have questions, I would love to answer them. If you want to connect with me, do so on the link below. You can order my book from there. You can connect with me on my Patreon site. You can connect with me through my Quantum Circle. And I just hope you guys have a wonderful week, and don't be afraid to go after those goals. Don't be afraid to seek after your peace. Don't be afraid of what's coming your way, because when you learn to transmute failure into something beautiful, there's so much growth that can take place.